Hello viewers, I'm the Aussie IT Contractor, and this time we're going to take an in-depth view into the contract itself. It's what puts contract into contractor. This video does not offer legal, financial, accounting or taxation advice and is specifically for an Australian audience. So a quick recap on who's who. First off, we have the client, which is the company for whom the work is being performed. Then we have the agency who recruits the contractor and handles things like payroll. And finally, we have you, the contractor. There are also two contracts involved here. One is between the client and the agency, and the second is between the agency and the contractor. And in this video, we're looking at the second one. A contract is a formal agreement between two parties. For a contract to be valid, it must contain an offer from one party, an acceptance from the other party, and completion by both parties. It also requires informed consent of both parties on the terms and conditions that they are agreeing to enter into. Every agency will have its own flavour of the IT contract that it wishes to use. However, they will all contain some sort of standard clauses as well as a schedule. The first clause of the contract will always specify who the legal entities are who are entering into the contract, that is, the agency and yourself. Next up will be some sort of definition section which just runs through the terms that are used in the contract just to make it absolutely clear what the intention is of those words that they are using. When you take your car to the local dealer to have it serviced, you're probably not all that concerned whether it's serviced by Bob or Karen. But IT contracts are always for a specified person. They don't want to employ one person and then find out that that person has outsourced it to someone completely different. There is generally a clause that attempts to restrict the contractor from engaging directly with the client or engaging via another agency to that client during the initial contract period or for some time after the contract has expired. From the agency's perspective, they don't want to put in the time and the effort to find the right person and recruit them and have them engage with their client, only to find out that that contractor turns around and engages directly with the client and cuts them out of their income stream. While working for a client, a contractor may come across intellectual property or in fact develop intellectual property for that client and have access to confidential information. So there are naturally clauses within the contract that protect the client and the agency to ensure that the contractor does not divulge such information to third parties or competitors. A conflict of interest clause is there to ensure that the contractor is working in the best interests of the client and isn't there to enrich themselves in ways that are unfair to the client or in detriment to the client. Depending on whether you're contracting via your own company or as an individual, there will be various insurance and indemnity clauses in the contract. This is to ensure that you don't pass your personal professional risks onto the agency and that you're covered if any insurable event occurs. And then we come to the schedule. So while most of the contract is pretty generic and straightforward and standard to everyone who signs a contract, the schedule is specific to the particular contract that the contractor is entering into. It will have things like the start and end dates of the contract, any notice periods that are applicable for that contract, the agreed pay amount, such as the daily rate, and any requirements around how the contractor should complete timesheets and how to claim expenses. The schedule is often a separate addendum to the contract to facilitate things like contract renewals, which will involve different start and end dates and different notice periods perhaps, and changes to payment amounts. Having a separate schedule means that they don't have to rewrite the entire contract every time the contract rolls over. They can just update the schedule. So, given that the agency has written the contract and they have very specific standardised clauses within that contract, does the contractor have any say on what's in the contract itself? Well, only to a limited extent. You're not going to be able to rewrite the whole contract to your liking, but if you feel very strongly about a certain clause and are willing to hold out on signing the contract, thus possibly risking the role itself, then you may be able to force the agency's hand in changing the clause for you. The big message is don't sign the contract and then try to renegotiate it later. The time to negotiate any changes is before you sign. As an IT contractor, I've probably signed 15 to 20 contracts over my career, and to be quite honest, most of them are bog standard and didn't cause me any concerns whatsoever. There were one or two where I've really objected. I had to dig my heels in to have clauses taken out, One, because I didn't think that they were going to be enforceable clauses, and two, I didn't understand what the purpose was and why the agency would even want them in the first place. One was a really weird clause that I would sign any document that was presented to me. I don't know how this is enforceable. How can you agree up front what document you're going to sign in the future? It could be anything. I've forced that one to be taken out. The second one was not to discuss my pay rate with anyone. Now this is a particular attack on IT contractors, because what they're saying is, don't tell anyone what your rate is. We don't want anyone to know because we don't want collective bargaining. I force this one out as well. It's up to you. Sometimes you might just say, I'm not going to be worried about this clause and sign it anyway, or you might be like me and really dig your heels in on it. But it's a personal choice. I thought at this point it may be useful just to discuss what is a breach of contract. So a breach of contract occurs when one or more of the conditions or requirements of the clause in the contract is not met by one of the parties. Now, firstly, a breach of contract does not mean that the whole contract is automatically voided. A breach can be remediated, or the contract can endure with that breach continuing or even being forgiven. Enforcement of the breach comes down to the willingness of the aggrieved party to take action via mediation or a court to force the other party to repair the breach. Now, deciding factors on this include the seriousness of the breach, what damage was caused by that action or inaction, and generally how motivated the aggrieved party is. Undertaking legal action is costly in terms of money and time, and in addition to providing that a breach has occurred, it's generally also required that there is a tort or real damages involved as a direct result of that breach occurring. In my experience, it's far more likely that if things go pear-shaped in the contract, that the contract will just be terminated. Things have to go spectacularly wrong for one of the parties to engage in legal action to try and remedy that contract. Now, there's one standard clause in the contract that I've seen breached, and you should imagine the word breach in air quotes, without any real consequences, and that is the restriction covenant. It is generally not in an agency's interest to enforce this. It only alienates the client by trying to stop them from hiring someone, i.e. the former contractor, making the client less likely to want to deal with that agency in the future. Also, no agency wants to be known in the contractor community as being difficult to deal with and stopping the contractor from finding new work. Plus, a court is unlikely to look favourably at an agency stopping their former contractor from finding work merely because it deprives that agency of an ongoing revenue stream. Now, trying to jump mid-contract to work in the exact same role via a different agency may rile them up, but finding a new role with the same client via a different agency at the end of the contract is unlikely to result in anything more than an unhappy phone call from the agent to the contractor. So whether you're looking for your very first contract, or perhaps you're a contractor that hasn't really paid much attention to what they're signing in the past, here's a little bit of advice for you. Pay strict attention to your contract. You're not covered by employment laws. You need to understand what's in your contract, what the clauses are, and make sure that you understand and are happy with everything that you are agreeing to. With that said, happy contracting.